What honor it is to be here. Thank you for coming today and sharing this moment with me. I am very grateful. So I have a question for you. How many of you like platitudes? You know, when you're like hurting and you're feeling down and the world seems to be coming to an end and somebody walks up to you and goes, change your mind, change your world. Or how about this one? Consciousness, so where your consciousness is where your reality is. Or my favorite when I was growing up, my mom would say, just shift, just shift. And what happens in this practice and this teaching sometimes is we get to this place of working and living on these platitudes and we forget that there's this thing called spiritual bypass. And spiritual bypass basically means that when I am living, I think I'm spiritual enough that I don't need to feel and experience reality in this body. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. You know, I remember my father. It was about 12 years ago. My father was in ICU. He was just about to pass away. And my thought was, hey, I'm a practitioner. I don't have to deal with the mourning of losing my father because I understand that it's just a transition, right? No, that's not the way that works. Because our body has to go through the emotional disconnection from someone that we love, right? So these spiritual bypasses or these phrases that we have learned to hate to hear, especially when we're in this angst, are actually really wonderful words of wisdom. But it takes work. It's not just as easy as we make it sound. So let me give you an example. April 4th, just a month ago or so, I'm sitting in my car and the windows are down and there's this beautiful breeze going through my vehicle and I'm finishing up my paperwork. One of the advantages of being a hospice chaplain is I can work in my car. So I'm doing my documentation and the day is almost over and a text comes in. And these 10 words on this text throw me into a spiral. I am terrified. I am freaking out. My mind is going and I'm thinking, how am I going to survive this one? I don't know that I can. Oh my gosh, the tears came. My heart was pounding. I could barely breathe. I'm not really exactly sure how I got home, but I did, and safely. And then I remember who I am. I have to lean into those spiritual practices, and I've been doing this a while now. So I have spiritual practices in place. So I have to, get to that place of who am I? Well, we all know I'm a perfect expression of God, right? I have to immerse myself in the reading. So I took out my book, and this is one of my go-to books, The Power of Decision. Have you read this one? If you haven't, it's a good one. It's written by Raymond Charles Baker. It was written in 1960-something, and it's so wonderfully basic. It's simple. And he lays it out, and I go, that's right. That's right. And then, of course, I go into meditation, because we do that, right? And we go into prayer work, spiritual mind treatment. That's one of our foundations. And I, start talking to some of my community. I have prayer partners. I hope everybody has prayer partners. Calling up, kind of going over what's going on, working through it. I'm proud to say it took me about 3 days to get myself back to center, which it used to take a lot longer. So 3 days was amazing. And I'd like to say that's where the story ends, but it's not. Because the reality of life is that this body, these emotions, this thought process, this consciousness that we experience can be kind of tricky to traverse. Transformation is not something is one and done, at least not for me. So I had more to this story. You've all heard of the butterfly? The whole story of the butterfly. It's actually pretty amazing. There's this little caterpillar and it gobbles up all the leaves and then it creates this cocoon and then it turns into a butterfly and it flies away. Okay, there's way more to that story, right? Because we know when that cocoon is made, the butterfly or the caterpillar is actually liquefied. Did you know that? And it becomes this goo. It is completely dispatched and torn apart, and it has to be recreated to something more beautiful. And believe me, during this process that I went through the last month, kind of felt like that, where I was goo for a while. But then something, and the story's not done there, right? Because then the butterfly comes together and becomes the butterfly. But now it has to tear and struggle and force itself out of the cocoon. And now, after all the work and all the struggle and all the self-awareness and all of the discoveries, now the butterfly flies. So I went back because I understand that there is a narrative in my mind. And what had happened is a girlfriend of mine we had made an agreement. And I felt like she broke the agreement. And I was devastated. However, I'm a smart individual. I understand that there's different motivations. So I went to my sister, who is a wonderful reframer. Do you know what a reframer is? It's when you take the narrative and you work it around and you make it something different, still logical, still making sense, still practical, but different. So I had this new narrative, which was wonderful. And I was so grateful for this narrative because it made me feel safe again. So I decided I'm just going to shift. I'm just going to pay attention to this narrative over here. But every now and then this narrative of me being betrayed and it not being right and not being fair would just kind of pop up. And I'd go, no, I'm going to pay attention to this narrative. Unfortunately, that didn't stop the narrative from keeping coming up. So obviously there was more work to be done, right? So I start looking into it. I have to ask myself, the transitions didn't show up. That's okay. I had to ask myself, what is the story I'm telling myself? Because again, studies have shown that the memory that we remember is not the memory of the event. It's the memory of the last time we thought about it. So if you've thought about something a dozen times, you're not remembering the original thing that happened. You're remembering the memory of the memory of the memory of the memory of the memory, right? So is it the truth? Is that memory the truth of what actually happened? And if it's the truth, is there a way of restructuring it? That was the whole narrative shift, which I did. But it was still bugging me. So that takes us to the next step, is if it still hurts, then there's forgiveness that needs to happen here. And the question is, who do I need to forgive? And so I really went in, and I'm like, okay, so here's my story that I've made up, because of course we always make up our own stories, because it's always happening in our mind, right? So here's the story I want to believe. Here's the story that keeps coming up. Where is the forgiveness? And I realized it was me. I needed to forgive me because I had created a situation where the agreement was made 15 years ago, by the way. And at no point in time, even though I knew that her brain has shifted somewhere, I never went to her and said, hey, we need to have a conversation around this. I was too scared because I felt too vulnerable. It didn't work out well for me. So I decided I needed to forgive me. I also needed to forgive her because somewhere in my mind I thought if she really loved me, that she would have read my mind and she would have made it better because that was the right thing to do, right? So there was lots of forgiveness that had to happen. So I made the decision I'm going to do the forgiveness. Now again, forgiveness is not an instantaneous thing. You don't go, I forgive, and it's done. God, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? So every time this scenario came up and my feelings got hurt, I would do you may have heard of, there's a Hawaiian prayer, right? Right? And it's, help me with this. Right, what is the prayer? I'm sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. I love you. So I would say that to myself. I'm sorry, forgive me. Thank you, I love you. To forgive me. And it worked really well, mostly. But there was still something there. So I was in the healing process. I knew that. And journaling. Actually, the first time I heard about journaling was so many years ago, and it was actually from your practitioner, Valerie. Because she had talked about, in one of my classes, and wherever I happened to have been there, about journaling and how important it was And so I sat down and I started writing this letter to my dear friend. And I let it all out, all of the hurt, all of the blame, all of the victim in my brain, all of this personal responsibility that I was taking on. I just wrote it all down. And I cried, and then I cried less, and then I cried less, and then all of a sudden I wasn't crying anymore. And I felt almost like the butterfly out of the cocoon, but not quite. Because there's still one very important element that we need to know, and that is, what did I learn? Because it's great to do the work, it really is. But if you're not learning something, then what was the point? So what did I learn? 3 major things, and you might be able to take this into your tool chest. 1, get it in writing and have it witnessed, right? 2, have the courage to have those conversations, even if they're scary. 3, inaction is really action. No choice is a choice. So now I had all my parts, right? I had understood my narrative. I had changed my narrative to something that worked better. I had reframed it. I had worked through the hurt and the forgiveness, and I'd had my lessons. Now again, this took me an entire month, which is a lot faster than it used to be. And the end of that story is, in 40 days, from beginning to end, I had no intention to do this beforehand, but as it ended up, I pre-qualified for a mortgage. I got the mortgage, and now I own the condo I live in, at which I've been living in for 15 years. 40 days. I don't exactly know how that all happened, because the down payment alone was a little impressive. But the reality is, once I got through the angst and I surrendered to the truth of who and what I am, which is a perfect expression of God, the universe kind of put things as they needed to go, and I walked the path. Because we know that prayer works. We know that spiritual mind treatment works, but it does not work alone. There's an old saying, and I'm sure you've heard it: treat and move your feet. There we go. Treat and move your feet. If you don't move in this reality, nothing happens. Everything takes effort, because that is part of being human. So the spiritual bypass is easy, but it doesn't serve us. It's not the reality of why we're here. How many of you have read this book? If you haven't, I highly recommend it. This was actually the first book I read as a spiritual book, right? And for those who have not read it, it was written by Richard Bach in 1977, and the story is about this guy named Richard who flies a plane, and he goes from field to field, and he gets paid to give rides. And he was on this spiritual journey, and all of a sudden, the old saying, ask, and when the student is ready, the teacher will show up, right? So Don, the teacher, Mr. Guru, he shows up, and he's doing all this wonderful teaching and understanding and concepts. And then Richard says, well, even after all that, what is the point? What is the point of all of this? The good times, the bad times. And so Don, in his infinite wisdom, never actually straight answers a question. He says, let's go to the movies. And Richard's like, I don't really want to go to the movies. He goes, let's go to the movies. You got money? You're paying. Let's go to the movies. So they go to the movies, and they're watching Butch and the Sundance Kid. And and Richard's really trying to focus on the movie, like the screenshots and the writing and the cinematography and how did he put it together. And all of a sudden, he finds himself all caught up in this great movie that he loves. He's seen several times. And then right towards the end, Don says, why are you here? And he goes, because you asked me. And he goes, no, that's not why. Why are you here? And he's getting frustrated because it's right on the end, right? This whole dramatic scene is happening. And he goes, because I chose to be. And he finishes watching the movie, and Don doesn't say another word. So now they're walking to the plains. And Richard's like, why did we go see that movie? And Don said, because you asked me a question. And that was the answer, Richard says. And so, of course, in Dawn's way of asking questions, it all comes down to choice. We chose to come here. As spiritual beings, we chose to have a physical reality. And there's only two reasons that we come to see the movie, either for education or entertainment. That's it. Education or entertainment. And so you know when the entertainment stuff is happening, right? Because that's fun. But the education doesn't always look fun. Sometimes it can put you into a tailspin, right? So I recommend the book. So platitudes. Change your mind, change your life. It's true. Is it that simple? Is it that easy? Maybe not, but it's true. Your consciousness creates the way you see your life, the reality that you live in. It's true. And even my mom was right. Sometimes you just got to shift. Thank you. Let's pray. I love pray. So if you're comfortable to close your eyes, please do so. If not, lighten your gaze. Allow my words to be your words. Knowing that God is all there is, knowing that God is the source of all things, the beginning, the middle, the end. It is the laughter, it is the sun and the moon and the stars. God is the energy that flows in and of and through everything. As I know this to be the truth, I know that I am of and from and in and as this universal energy. It is who and what I am. And knowing this is truth, I know that I and my word has power. So I declare right here and right now that I am willing and able and surrendering to the transformation, the traversing of the transformation that is Rachael. I know that to be the truth for everyone in this space, everyone that hears my voice at this moment, with the courage that comes with it, with the strength that comes with it, with the love that comes with it. I know that I am whole, that I am complete, and that I am in for quite the movie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I release my word into the law, knowing it is done, done, done. And so it is.